On January 7, 1975, Samuel Guy was moonlighting as a night guard in a hotel in Atlanta, Georgia. But that night, something unusual happened. He got into a confrontation with two robbers and, tragically, he was shot dead. Samuel Guy was killed viciously, but the case remained unsolved and cold for decades. There were many questions surrounding the case. Did Samuel ultimately receive justice? Who were those murderers? And how was this case solved? Born on February 15, 1925, Samuel Guy was raised by his family in Brookwood, Dallas County, Alabama. At an early age, Samuel Guy joined the police department and served as a law enforcement officer in the Atlanta Police Department in Georgia. He was married to Francine Guy. They were parents of 3 children, a son David, along with 2 daughters, who lived as a happy family. He served in the military from 1943 to 1946. Samuel was highly decorated and esteemed in his community. He had worked in the police department for 19 years and earned respect. For years, he was considered as a hero in his area due to his role as a diligent police officer. During an interview, David, the only son of Samuel, shared his feelings and emotions for his father.
He was such a good man and just so well-liked, and he was sort of like the neighborhood hero everybody looked up to, and especially when he became a policeman. Down deep, I felt that maybe one day I would be able to be involved in the apprehension of these people.
At the same time, he felt disappointed that even after so many years, his father did not receive justice. It was a dark, rainy night outside in Georgia on January 7, 1975. Samuel Guy was doing his duty as a night security guard at Howard Johnson Motel in Fulton County. While working that night, Samuel noticed something unusual. He saw 2 unknown men trying to rob the cash register. He decided to intervene and stop the robbery, and bravely, he approached the men. But it was not his day. The armed robbers got engaged in a gunfight with Samuel, and sadly, he got shot by one of the robbers in the shoulder and in the thigh. Before leaving, the robbers took Samuel's pistol and $275 from the register. After the incident, Samuel was taken to the hospital in critical condition. The bullet had entered his femoral artery, which caused him to bleed heavily. Being informed, his family arrived at the hospital, but unfortunately, Samuel did not survive. It was a moment when Samuel's family experienced a huge and tragic loss. After all they had been through, the family just wanted to know who was responsible for his murder. Meanwhile, the police quickly sprung into action, and an immediate investigation was launched. Authorities were actively seeking any leads to catch the perpetrators. Atlanta police conducted a massive search for Samuel's killer. Every suspect and potential witness was interrogated. Despite all their efforts, the Atlanta Police Department failed to bring any results, as no suspect was identified. But during the initial investigation and inquiry into the case, authorities got to know about a man named Harold Wiley. He was primarily suspected after the initial investigation and was arrested. Police obtained a confession from Harold Wiley. However, it was not considered credible due to his psychological problems, and he was released. With insufficient evidence, investigators suspected that the crime might have been committed by someone from outside Atlanta. As police found no lead in this case, the case remained unsolved and cold for years. After Samuel's death, his son David, who was working as a cop, was totally invested in the case, as he was constantly looking for closure. So he individually started working on his father's case and put his effort into investigating with any hope of getting any leads. In 1982, Arthur Krinsky, a special agent of the FBI who was a part of the fugitive squad, got a clue in this case after conducting extensive research. He told David about a tip naming two locals, Terry Jackson and Abner Wilkinson, as his father's suspected shooters. After receiving the crucial information, David was eager to commence the investigation immediately. But despite David's persistence, he was asked to step back from the investigation due to his personal connection to the case. However, he continued to push for further investigation. The investigation continued for some more time, but once again, due to insufficient evidence, there was no progress in the case and it was temporarily closed. Observing the state of the case, cold case detectives Jim Rose and Scott Bennett were assigned to the case. One day when in the office, Scott got a phone call from a woman who claimed that she knew everything about the killer of Samuel. Scott took that phone call very seriously.
This was not some crackpot. This was somebody that knew what they were talking about. And she gave the name of Abner Wilkinson as being one of the perpetrators, and an individual that she knew only as TJ.
Then Scott and Jim contacted the woman who was named Myrtle. After a long time, the cold case came into action in 1999 with the arrival of Myrtle. Myrtle was the ex-wife of the suspected shooter, Abner Wilkinson. She revealed crucial information about her husband's involvement in the murder case and went for a closed-door interrogation with the investigators.
I saw it on television, on the news, but he told me before I saw it, told me right after it happened.
Surprisingly, during the interrogation, Myrtle mentioned the involvement of TJ, of whom she didn't know the full name. But she was quite sure that TJ was Abner Wilkinson's accomplice in the crime.
Can you tell me the name of the person that was with him? Do you know his full name?
TJ.
Just TJ?
Myrtle disclosed that Abner Wilkinson had confided in her about his involvement in the incident shortly after the murder in 1975. Now, the question was, why did she reveal everything after so many years of the incident? Well, according to Myrtle, she kept the secret hidden for more than 20 years because she was terrified after knowing the truth. She could not gather courage to open up about the truth at that time. But as time passed, Abner Wilkinson and his wife Myrtle got separated, and he had to pay for their child support. But when he struggled to meet child support payments, his wife Myrtle decided to come out with the truth and disclosed everything to the investigators. As the next step of the investigation, detectives contacted the victim's son, David Guy, who was a retired deputy sheriff of Fulton County by then. He worked on his father's case for 20 years and had found some crucial information during his investigation. The supervisor of the investigation, Mickey Lloyd, called David one day and asked him for any suspected names in the case.
Their supervisor, Mickey Lloyd, called me and said, I just want you to know that something's happening on your dad's case.
With David's assistance, they came up with the name Terry Jackson, who was figured to be the same TJ mentioned by Myrtle. In 1982, David and FBI Special Agent Arthur Krinsky conducted further investigation, and they came across another name, Larry Smith. Larry was going to be a crucial witness in the case, as he claimed that he knew who killed Samuel Guy. From Larry, the investigating authorities got to know that two people were directly involved in the murder case. He claimed that Terry Jackson and Abner Wilkinson killed Samuel Guy that night. Larry's statement was recorded for further legal proceedings. Unfortunately, there were only claims, no strong evidence against the murderers, and the case got cold once again. But Jim and Scott remained emotionally involved in this case. They wanted to bring justice to Samuel's family. As the investigation continued on the basis of collected evidence, Abner was arrested and interrogated several times. But every time he got bail, as there was no strong evidence to prove him guilty. Now, investigators had one option left: to make the culprit confess. At last, Jim Rose and Scott Bennett executed a plan. They planted a false story among Abner's neighbors, family, and friends that police were frantically searching for him everywhere. The plan was to create false fear in Abner so that he became restless and surrendered himself to the police.
I wanted his neighbors to go to him, and I wanted his friends to go to him, and I wanted his family members to go to him and tell him that the police department was looking for you.
Out of the blue, he'd run into somebody that said, hey, these two Atlanta homicide cops are here asking questions about you.
As this drama went on for some time, wherever Abner went, he got to know that the police were actively seeking his arrest. And gradually, he became certain that he could not escape the arrest at that time. Surprisingly, the plan reached its eventual conclusion on one of those days. On September 17, 1999, Abner Wilkinson himself reached the Atlanta PD headquarters with a suitcase in his hand, with a readiness to pay for his sins. Finally, he surrendered himself. In September of 1999, Abner confessed his involvement and acknowledged that he and Terry Jackson planned to rob the hotel that night to buy as they were compulsive drug addicts. Overwhelmed by the burden of guilt, Abner opted to cooperate with investigating authorities. He became a state witness and provided comprehensive details about the crime. Investigators videotaped all the confessions by Abner as strong evidence that could lead to closure. Abner described in detail what happened on the night of January 7, 1975. That night, Abner and Terry Jackson reached the hotel with the intention of robbery. Abner said he held the clerk at gunpoint, while Terry went to the back of the lobby, which prompted Samuel Guy to begin firing. Abner fired back in response. On the other end, Terry also started firing. What followed was a lethal gunfight, amidst which Samuel got shot. During the interrogation, Abner described how badly Samuel was injured during the gunfight.
I make the announcement, the officer got up and pulled his weapon, and he and I were, I was ducking behind the pillows and, shooting at each other.
Abner recalled that Samuel hit the ground after being severely injured. According to Abner, Terry Jackson was armed with a .38 caliber handgun, and he shot Samuel in the femoral artery, which later caused him to die.
I back and walked on through the lobby, and he came back and shot him in the leg, lower region. He didn't like shoot him in the vital area, And he said, they'll get bad, But I didn't know it meant that he was going down.
Then Terry instructed Abner to discard his weapon as they left that place, taking Samuel's pistol and $275 from the cash register. Later, Terry Jackson's friend Larry Smith also supported Abner's account, recalling a past conversation with Terry Jackson on the day of the incident, where Terry expressed frustration over this crime. In September of 1999, Abner Wilkinson and his companion Terry Jackson were both arrested, as this time the police had enough evidence against them. After 2 months, Terry Jackson was produced before the court for trial and was found guilty. As the legal proceedings went on, according to the agreement with the authorities, Abner Wilkinson entered a guilty plea in court for lesser charges. He provided testimony implicating himself and Terry Jackson responsible for Samuel Guy's death during the act of robbery. As per the agreement, Abner received a 12-year imprisonment of April of 2002, being found guilty in the case of Samuel Guy's murder and robbery. Later, Abner looked for forgiveness from Samuel's family and confessed that he was very sorry for everything.
I told Mr. Guy's family how sorry I was, and I wish that somehow they could find it to me, like in their heart, to me, like to forgive me for his demise.
In August of 2002, Terry Jackson filed an appeal in court seeking a new trial. According to him, his sentencing in 1999 was not fair, as it came 24 years after the time of the crime in 1975. He also claimed that the trial was unfair because a witness who could have helped him had died during that time. He appealed again in April of 2003, but the court rejected in the month of June that same year. Since then, he appealed multiple times, but all got turned down. He spent 12 years in Men's State Prison in Hardwick, Georgia. Finally, Terry Jackson's sentencing was upheld, by which he had been found guilty of 2 counts of robbery and 1 count of murder. Terry was convicted by the jury of the Fulton County Superior Court for killing Samuel Guy. Judge Doris Down sentenced him to lifetime imprisonment. While spending his time in a prison in Atlanta, Abner Wilkinson reportedly passed away on April 9, 2011. He was 75 at that time, and he was survived by his 4 children with Myrtle. The victim's widow, Francine Guy, had waited more than 25 years for the trial of the accused murderers, almost having given up hope. During the court trial, 75-year-old Francine had to take a nitroglycerin tablet as she was not feeling well, but she was bravely present to witness her husband's killers receive punishment. "I started trembling, and I have a heart condition, so I pulled out a nitro quick," she said. It was a very emotional moment for her. The police tried everything, but it took more than 25 years for them to catch the criminals and make them pay for what they had done. Law ultimately provided justice to Samuel Guy, and the family felt relieved. The cold case detective Jim Rose was honored with Samuel Guy's badge number for his effort and success in the case.
It's an honor to have such a great man's badge number assigned to you, a man that was well loved on the police department by everybody, well loved by his family, and I'm proud every time I put it on.
On the other side, a few questions were raised by defense lawyer Kim Demecki about Myrtle and Larry Smith. He showed no trust in them and raised the question, why are they both telling the same story after so many years?